Hello, and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Liz Cavell. Today, we're going to discuss some of FFRF's recent victories. And we're going to show that despite the rise of Christian nationalism and open hostility from the Supreme Court, the separation of church and state is not dead. FFRF is continuing to defend citizens' constitutional rights and our precious First Amendment. We're also going to discuss a recent victory from one of our allies. So to do that, I'm joined by FFRF attorney Chris Line. Hi, Chris. And our senior litigation counsel, Patrick Elliott, and from the Twin Cities. Hi, Pat.
Hello.
Remember that on Ask an Atheist, we want to hear your questions. You can either put them in the Facebook chat below, or you can email them to askanatheist@ffrf.org. So we have a lot to cover today. Let's jump right into our first case. We're going to talk about a court case. So in February of 2022, students at Huntington High School in Cavell County, West Virginia, were forced to attend an evangelical Christian revival led by Nick Walker. This was an assembly during the public school day. Here's an excerpt of the actual event with subtitles because the audio is hard to hear. Nick Walker is seemingly describing eternity in hell if the students don't get saved at the assembly.
You know, you just don't know. Dwells there, has a full memory. Meaning, you will sit there in that place, apart from God, and you will remember this service. You'll remember this moment. You'll remember this opportunity where you had to, like this chance you had to make it right. And you'll be tormented with this memory over and over and over and over, and it never ends, like it's eternity, and then it's done. So I present you with the fork in the road this morning. Don't be too cool for it. Don't be too prideful for it. Like this is what you were created for, guys. That's why revivals come to Huntington, because you were created for this.
It's compelling stuff. The following week, more than 100 students, led by senior Max Nybert, staged a dramatic walkout. They were protesting this school-sponsored Christian revival. The walkout had students chanting, "Separate the church and state," "My faith, my choice," and it actually got national media coverage by the Washington Post, NPR, and CNN, and even got covered internationally. So following the protest, nearly a dozen parents and students, with the help of FFRF, filed a high-profile federal lawsuit on February 17th of 2022. It was recently resolved, finally, and wrapped up. So Patrick, tell us about how the case was recently concluded.
Yeah, so at the end of October, we were actually able to resolve the case very favorably for about 12 plaintiffs that had participated. And really what they were after from the beginning was to make sure that this couldn't happen again, that other students were going to face the same type of problem with the next person to come through the school system. And so that's really what we accomplished. And before I get to some of that, they each got their $1 in nominal damages. So our plaintiffs do like that because their constitutional rights had been violated. And then the school system, through their insurer, actually had to pay for the last 18 months of us having to fight this out in court. So that cost, I think, $175,000 in attorney's fees and costs were paid by the insurer to cover our work and the work of our cooperating counsel. But the big thing is what the Board of Education did. That's really what our plaintiffs wanted. And so the board agreed to revamp its policies and adopt some provisions that would protect, other students and future students. So that basically required them to train their staff every year, and any new staff need to be trained before taking part in school activities to make sure that other teachers and other administrators aren't going to engage in this kind of thing. School principals and administrators were given a lot greater authority to monitor school events. And then the policies also were more specific because clearly there was a problem in the school system. This was not the first problem we've had. I know Chris is aware of prior violations. I've worked on prior violations in this school system. And so we had to spell it out more clearly for the people who work there and for the school system to make sure that other students wouldn't face these same type of problems in the future.
Yeah, this case was awesome.
Yeah.
I remember how excited everyone in the office was when we shared around that protest, that was happening. And just seeing, unfortunately, we have a lot of good complainants sometimes who are really concerned about things happening in their school, but we don't see a reaction like that with hundreds of students out protesting And then obviously a situation where we're able to file a lawsuit and get a school district to clean up its act, and with a mostly student-led, we're kind of just there, they're in the driver's seat, the students are, and the parents, and we got to just help them make sure that this wasn't going to happen again in the future. I think it's one of the best cases we've had in a while.
For sure. It takes a lot of courage, and it made a big difference.
Yeah, the other thing I would add, I think, Chris, is, we're highlighting the activism of the students here, which was amazing, but also they all knew how wrong this was. The fact that we have that audio recording is because there were students there who knew this is not supposed to be happening. And so now that technology working out in our favor for once, that students are able to kind of record what is going on in their schools, but people knew it was wrong. And you see the reaction here from the students the following week. I think it's impressive. And I think the younger generation certainly views the separation of church and state as important.
Yeah, I mean, and that's important to realize. That's how we're going to, as we kind of highlighted in the beginning, with Christian nationalists started our government, the Supreme Court, many of the justices openly hostile to the separation of church and state, saying it doesn't exist or it's, being misconstrued and things like that. These younger people give hope that, as the demographics change, we're going to still be able to keep fighting it. We're going to turn the tide within our government and be able to keep the separation of church and state protected and protect people's rights because of people like these students.
And before we move on, just one thing that I think is so important to point out, Patrick, is that we, you mentioned, complained about this before suing. So this is a great result through litigation, but the policy change, that was what these families wanted. Training for staff, policies in place that were more specific in terms of what's allowed at school-sponsored events, and other policies that provide for monitoring and school and district approval is what we asked for before suing. So again, these are the types of things we try to resolve without litigation. A lot of time and cost was incurred to get to this result, and it's a great result, but could have been achieved through cooperation.
Yeah.
But that's just one of our 3 recent litigation victories, and I want to move on to the next one. So on September 20th of 2022, the Freedom from Religion Foundation filed a lawsuit against South Carolina officials on behalf of 4 Palmetto State citizens challenging the unconstitutional funding of a private religious school. So South Carolina state lawmakers included a $1.5 million earmark in this year's budget to help Christian learning centers of Greenville County build a residential school. Patrick, tell us more about that case and how it was recently resolved.
Yeah, I think first, talking about Christian learning centers is helpful. So this is a group that really exists to evangelize public school students. So they and we have some of their materials, they promote that they basically, you just need a Bible and internet access, and then we'll teach you, basically fundamentalist Christianity. And so they're active in Greenville County schools by, taking students off-site and teaching them. And it's a fundamental religious entity. Their staff, are teaching. It's a faculty of a group of Christ-centered educators who have a passion for teaching and sharing God's word with our youth. So that's to get a flavor for what the group does. That's all they do. They don't do other activities. They've been doing that for about 25 years in the county, and this was funded by the state of South Carolina in the budget. And the governor, Governor McMaster, had actually asked for information about all these budget earmarks that come through, and so we were able to glean that this was for a new school building for this entity. And as you noted, Liz, they were going to get $1.5 million. So we sued with our four plaintiffs. And, as that case developed, it was interesting because a lot of the state officials didn't seem that intent on completely defending the unconstitutional nature of this grant. South Carolina has a very strong constitution that says, we're not going to fund private education, regardless of if it's religious or secular. So you can't fund private educational institutions. That's the one of the claims that we brought in this case. And, as the case proceeded, it came time to take the deposition of Christian Learning Centers, this group that I was referencing. And they then pulled out and said, we no longer want this money. You can't take our deposition. We're not going to accept it. And so basically formally withdrew from the state. And so going back to 2022, that's what we were asking for. FFRF, again, prior to suing, was saying, hey, the state can't fund this type of thing. Christian Learning Centers was defending it throughout until kind of push came to shove of the case was going to resolve that issue. They then pulled out. And so earlier this month, on November 9th, after multiple hearings, the district court formally said, yes, this case has become moot because I can't give you any relief now that the entity that would get the money is no longer seeking it. So the judge had dismissed the case, but really it's a win because the defendants and Christian Learning Centers have all acknowledged and agreed that money cannot go to that entity. So I think it's a great win for our members in the state of South Carolina and upholding the state's constitutional language.
Yeah, that's such a great result. Just flat out giant public taxpayer check going directly to a basically missionary organization. And I always laugh when I see that graphic with like the Bible Plus computer, because I always thought that was our graphic as like a really like blatant way of just explaining how unconstitutional it is to directly fund this, until I realized that's actually an exhibit in the way that they graphically describe their own program. So couldn't be more clear to just directly fund. We're not talking about a neutral, education grant program. This is just direct pork going straight to a religious sectarian organization, taxpayer money.
Yeah, and that I think is an important thing to highlight here, that despite some bad rulings and in certain areas where more and more religious funding is becoming permissible, the floodgates have not opened. They're completely, there is still a lot of areas where we cannot, where public funding of religion is still, that we can still stop it and we can still ensure that taxpayers are not required to take government funds and use them directly to proselytize to kids and things like that. So, another area we're able to keep fighting in.
It's a good one. So finally, I want to highlight one more litigation victory. On October 3rd, 2023, FFRF filed a lawsuit on behalf of a New Jersey resident against the Secretary of State for forcing public office candidates, so people seeking elected public office, to swear a mandatory religious oath. So Patrick, tell us more about that case and how was it resolved?
Yeah, and we were representing our plaintiff in the case is James Tassone, who actually had run for office several times before in New Jersey and wanted to run for office again. And so when he sought to run for office in 2022, he reached out to the Division of Elections because of the state of New Jersey's required oath. They have a religious oath, which some of us are familiar with, but certainly it says, do solemnly swear, and then it ends, so help me God. And so he is a non-theist and opposes swearing this. And so you'd think it would be a pretty simple matter to, request an alternative form or what we would all call an affirmation, omitting the religious language. And the Division of Elections was not willing to do that for him. That division is within the New Jersey Secretary of State's office. So again, what FFRF did is we wrote to the Secretary of State, we wrote to the Division of Elections saying, hey, this is unconstitutional. Not only does this violate the Establishment Clause, but it's a religious test for office. You can't only allow candidates to run for office who are willing to swear a religious oath. So when that had failed over the last, at least well over a year, then we filed suit, as Liz mentioned, in early October, seeking to an alternative, a secular alternative for Mr. Tassone. And this was actually probably one of our quickest victories ever, because we're actually, after the result here, is getting him to be able to do the thing he wants and making sure that other people can do it. So after we filed suit, the Secretary of State's office and actually the Division of Elections sent out a memorandum to all these clerks saying, yes, you can provide, these different options, including allowing somebody to declare and affirm in place of the "so help me God" language. So that was pretty quick. I think we have the date on there, October 24th. So, it was just a matter of weeks getting that changed by filing the lawsuit. they also gave these examples of what the secular affirmation would look like. So you look here, it doesn't include any of the religious language or so help me God language. So now in the future, Mr. Tassone or anybody else certainly can go forward and submit to be a candidate for office without having to swear so help me God. So it's too bad that it took a lawsuit to do this, but I think the result is really good. So earlier this month, we voluntarily then dismissed the case because there was really nothing else for him to do. He was quite pleased with getting that result that quickly.
That's
yeah,
great.
We've been discussing around the office whether or not that was a record-breaking start to finish litigation timeline, but it was an easy fix. It's just a matter of, affirming rather than swearing and allowing candidates to omit that language, whether it's whiting it out, crossing it out, or providing alternative forms or alternative online forms. This is not a big accommodation on these oaths that should be secular in the first place. So it was a good result.
Yeah, that's one thing I think about is like the fact that a lot of these places who do have this oath will just say like, oh, just cross it out or whatever. It's like, well, that's a really valuable thing to have people be signing then, if you can just cross it out and it doesn't change at all the meaning or the legality behind the thing you're signing.
But it is such a conscience-based thing. It is, in addition to being a religious test for public office, there are people, not just non-theists, who, for conscience-based reasons, would not want to swear to God that they're telling the truth. So penalty of perjury kind of gets the job done and is fine. So it was a good result.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah. On top of those great FFRF victories, there was another victory recently for one of our allies. The Satanic Temples had a lot of success recently with its after-school Satan Club program. The after-school Satan Clubs are meant to push back against Good News Clubs taking over public schools. So if a school district allows the Good News Club to meet in its schools, it's got to also allow an after-school Satan Club. As a district in Pennsylvania learned the hard way. TST, the Satanic Temple, had applied to hold meetings at Saucon Valley Middle School in February of 2023 in accordance with the district's policy allowing organizations, including religious groups like the Christian-based Good News Club, to rent its facilities for civic, cultural, educational, and recreational activities. Now, although the district initially approved the application, it quickly reversed the decision in response to public pressure, claiming that the district's refusal to allow those school facilities violated the First Amendment. The Satanic Temple actually filed a lawsuit in March of 2023. The ACLU of Pennsylvania and National ACLU represented the Satanic Temple in that lawsuit. In granting emergency relief to TST earlier in 2023, this was about 6 months ago, the federal court over that concluded that the district's decision to deny access to school facilities was improperly based on the Satanic Temple's controversial views on religion and the community's negative reactions thereto. The court further explained, when confronted with a challenge to free speech, the government's first instinct must be to forward expression rather than quash it, particularly when the content is controversial or inconvenient. Nothing less is consistent with the express purpose of American government to secure the core innate rights of its people. So, a good indication of how the courts were going to go. So because of that, the Satanic Temple and the district actually settled the lawsuit a couple weeks ago. And here's a news package on the resolution.
Settlement has been reached over allegations that a Northampton County school district improperly blocked an after-school Satan Club from meeting on school grounds. The Satanic Temple sued the Saucon Valley School District after the club was banned from gathering in school facilities. Under the settlement, the district agreed to pay $200,000 in fees and costs to the Satanic Temple. The district must also allow the after-school Satan Club to meet on school grounds.
Yes, so as I said, the school district has now agreed to permit the Satanic Temple and after-school Satan Club equal access to school facilities that other clubs and organizations have. Additionally, the settlement limits the school district from retaliating against anyone affiliated with the Satanic Temple or the club or the organizations themselves based on their viewpoint. District also agreed to pay $200,000 to cover the costs for the Satanic Temple's attorneys. So what should have been a very easy thing for the district to do, we allow groups to meet, we don't get to stop a group because of their religious views. Instead, they did the wrong thing, and it ended up costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yep, this is a pure free speech lawsuit. You know, the public school district, when it rents out its facilities like that to non-school organizations, is creating a public forum, which is a legal term of art for a government run forum for speech, and it's the quintessential violation of our First Amendment to censor speech based on viewpoint. So it regularly allows good news clubs to meet on school grounds under that policy, and denies the same for After School Satan Club because everyone in the community freaks out at the word Satan. Of course, the After School Satan Club is really free speech activism.
Right.
The whole club is like science projects and, you know, other types of community service projects.
And I just was going to point out the irony in the, you know, in the whole thing is religious groups are the ones who sued to create, you know, this is now mandatory
Yes.
to allow a group to be using school facilities regardless of if they're doing something religious. And so, you know, the irony being now when other group takes advantage of it, of course, everybody cries foul and tries to block them. And you know, people may balk at the amount of money involved here, but it certainly was going to go up if the school district was going to, you know, continue down that road of trying to block a group. But I just like the justice of, you know, another organization taking advantage of something that the religious right, you know, the Christian nationalists have been doing since the mid 90s is when these cases started, you know, trying to sue to get access to schools and saying it's mandatory to allow it. So that's kind of where we're at with why this Satanic Temple is doing something helpful here.
Yeah, and it's important to remember for people who don't know, the Satanic Temple is not actually Satanist. It's free thinkers, sort of a non-religious group using Satan as a representation of free thought and of free, you know, sort of rebelling against religion. They do a great job. And in fact, as I kind of noted, they are going to places where there's already a good news club.
Yeah.
So they do cause a lot of trouble when they come in. There's bomb threats. It's very scary, not because of them, because of people's reaction to them.
Yes.
But they are committed to not going where there's no good news club. And in fact, they had just actually recently announced the other day, they had a school all ready to go, but they saw that the good news club, in sort of seeing that they were coming, pulled out of the school, and they themselves canceled their club that they had all ready to go because they're only going to be holding these clubs in response to the Christian club. They're not going around trying to start new forums or going into a town that has no, you know, Christian clubs and trying to cause trouble. They're just trying to show equal representation and kind of get through people's heads because, you know, people react terribly to this. The Satanists are going to be in our public school, but they don't have that same reaction to Christians meeting there and using that as a platform to kind of go after children. And that's sort of the point and the thing they're trying to highlight.
Right. So that was a good result for an allied organization. Fortunately, we don't always have to file a lawsuit in order to uphold the separation between church and state. Like I mentioned before, we try to resolve complaints cooperatively with government actors without having to take legal action. So Chris, you wanted to highlight a few big non-litigation victories from the past couple of weeks that we came to cooperatively.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some big victories that are almost as big as these legal ones, but through without having to take a lawsuit, which is great. In early November, we learned that Prague Elementary School in Oklahoma had been hosting daily prayers during its morning announcements. And the district's Facebook page was regularly posting photos and the full names of the young students who had supposedly asked if they could pray. We don't have those images because we're not going to share images of students with their full names the way that the school district did. But anyway, they publicized they put these pictures on social media, presumably so that, you know, they could receive accolades from the community, you know, so that people could see, oh, these are the students choosing to pray every day. These were young students. So basically every single day, these students were asking to lead the prayer over the announcements. And so even if they were allegedly, if that's true, they really were asking to deliver the daily prayers, they were only doing that because the school had established a practice of having students deliver a prayer, actively promoting this in-school worship. You know, it wasn't completely out of the blue. Some students like, hey, can I go on the announcements and lead a prayer? Obviously, they had started doing it at some point, and then now suddenly it's like, oh, well, my friend Billy led the prayer yesterday. Now I'm gonna, you know, I want to lead the prayer today and let everyone congratulate me for being so willing to do this. Obviously, school.
And these are this is an elementary school
elementary
too,
school.
right? We're not talking about a high school level where people might actually have more editorial options. This is elementary school kids doing this.
Right, and the school cannot allow prayer to be broadcast via school-controlled loudspeaker to a captive audience of students. In response to that letter, the district ended its unconstitutional prayer practice. Their attorney was very good. He understood the law. They removed the Facebook posts. The district agreed that the posts and the prayer were inappropriate for a public school district. So the district, upon learning, when we got to the school district's attorney and the superintendent, they realized this is clearly unconstitutional, and they immediately stopped. Now, not one to stand by as the school district follows the Constitution. Oklahoma's Christian nationalist state superintendent Ryan Walters posted a response video on X claiming that we, FFRF, are funded by George Soros and that we bullied the schools into bowing down by simply asking that they follow clearly established law. We've got a clip of.
Today we see Prague Public Schools backing down to a radical atheist group. We're going to continue to fight for religious liberty and religious freedom here in the state of Oklahoma. What we've seen as a group that's funded by George Soros, that is atheist, that is from out of state, has come in and targeted children that are initiating prayer in Prague Public Schools. But, just as bad, we have Prague Public Schools bowing down to these bullies and telling their students that they're not going to allow them to initiate prayer anymore. It's outrageous. We have to take a stand for our students' freedom of religion, their freedom to express their religious beliefs, no matter what those religious beliefs may be. So what we've got to do is we've got to tell groups like the Freedom from Religion group, like the ACLU, we will never back down to your bullying antics. We will not allow atheism to be the state-sponsored religion of our school system. Not here in Oklahoma. You guys need to leave our kids alone. We will not stand for it, and we will continue to fight for religious liberty here in the state of Oklahoma.
It's interesting to contrast that reaction from the school district, and the school district's attorney's reaction was, yep, we are definitely violating the law. We are going to stop immediately, versus, how he is obviously characterizing this misleadingly as religious freedom. He keeps saying the student initiated. Well, yes, students have the right to pray in school. They don't have the right to say, I would like to do that over the loudspeaker every single day. Well, we'll take turns every day leaning over the loudspeaker and making sure everyone has to hear our prayer. A prayer it should be a private thing. They can pray to themselves in small groups in ways that don't disturb the curriculum or in any way, sort of interrupt the school day. But in no way can a school district be allowed to do this. I mean, students have free speech rights in schools too, but nobody would say, oh, well, you're denying students their free speech rights if you don't allow them to say anything they want over the loudspeaker at any time. Obviously, there's a variety of things that he's misconstruing here, but those are some of the big ones.
Yeah. As we've said, as my co-host has said, Allison Gill on our podcast, if you look up Christian nationalist in the dictionary, there's a picture of Ryan Walters, because he spends all of his time as the superintendent of public education for the state of Oklahoma, grandstanding about how persecuted Christians are in the public schools, especially by groups like ours and other civil rights organizations that are working cooperatively with public school districts. Nobody is doing any bullying except for the bullying being done from the pulpit by Ryan Walters.
I mean, and this stuff's always been concerning, but we don't have to dive too far into it, but just even this George Soros thing is just, insane.
Oh yeah, that was news to us.
QAnon, insane level stuff.
Shouldn't we all be getting raises if we're getting funded by billionaires? Where's that? We're at a nonprofit.
Yeah,
here,
that was exciting news.
We are not funded.
Yeah, we're not funded by George Soros, just to make that clear.
Yeah.
Anywho,
yeah.
That was actually a good example, despite the superintendent of public education inserting himself into what was otherwise a perfect example of cooperatively resolving a complaint from a affected family in the district. We hear complaints from other Oklahomans who are also students in your public schools who are having to listen to the morning announcements and hear a prayer every single day, and they're not Christian. So they also have religious liberty rights and freedom of conscience to attend public school and not have anybody else's religion foisted onto them or their children. And the way to do that is to have the district itself remain neutral in school programming. And even Ryan Walters is smart enough to understand that what goes over the morning announcements at a public elementary school is school-sponsored speech and shouldn't include prayers.
Yeah, and these Christian nationalists have this weird, distorted view of reality wherein secular things, which is what our school is supposed to be, as in it is neither for nor against religion. Religion is just not brought up as a topic. It's neutral with regard to religion.
You mean the official religion of atheism? Right,
exactly. So to them, if they go somewhere, if the morning announcements just tell the kids what's going on that day in the school, that's an atheist, anti-religious thing because there was no prayer. So they clearly everywhere they go throughout their day are seeing all these atheist things because nobody's mentioning God.
Yeah, most people understand the difference between something that just doesn't make any mention of religion and leaves that to the rights of parents to control the religious upbringing of their kids at home. A neutral morning announcements that doesn't mention religion, and one that does.
Yeah.
So
we also had one more victory I want to talk about. A concerned parent had reported that their child's kindergarten teacher at Bell City High School, which is a K-12 school in Lake Charles, Louisiana, had been leading the class in reciting the Lord's Prayer every school day before lunch. The teacher has violated the trust that our complainant and all the parents place in Calcasieu Parish School District teachers to follow the Constitution and refrain from imposing their own religious beliefs on the children they teach. FFRF and Nicole Gaylor legal fellow Sammy Lawrence wrote to Superintendent Shannon Lafarge. After we reached out to the district, the superintendent confirmed in an email that the teacher was instructed to cease leading the kindergarten students in prayer each day. So sort of a similar situation. Not students engaging in religious expression, but a teacher imposing that onto students and
kindergartners, other people's kindergartners.
Right, exactly, and with the same sort of good result that should happen. We write to them, we explain the law, their lawyers look at it, and they resolve it. And as all these things sort of highlight, we are still able to resolve issues both through letters, through litigation. The separation of church and state still exists, and we're still fighting to protect, and we're still going to be able to work to protect citizens' rights, and so we'll keep at it.
That is right. So we're going to take a minute to see if there's any questions on the topic, and we don't often get to do a show that is just about good outcomes, so let's see. We have, oh, no, this is not today. Hang on, give me a minute here. There we go.
I guess while you're looking it up, Liz, I'll just offer, why the topic is, it's still alive is because the unsaid thing, which you've probably seen in prior episodes, is that the Supreme Court is trying to undercut the separation of state and church, as are some of the appellate courts in this country, as are the Christian nationalists. So I think, highlighting where this still exists, some of our victories, some of our allies' victories, I think it's a helpful, it's a helpful and important topic.
Yeah, no, definitely we need to highlight that in these times when, like we said, there's often a lot of bad news. I feel like at FFRF we're often having to share bad things that Christian nationalists are doing, or that we're having to highlight egregious violations occurring that we're having to try to stop. And so it's really nice to be able to share our successes and what we're able to do.
Okay, crisis averted. So here we go. Well, here, I don't usually start with Dan Barker's question, but I think it's a good one. So this is from Dan Barker, our friendly neighborhood atheist and co-president. What do you say when they complain that an outside atheist group from Wisconsin should stay out of their local affairs? As we heard Ryan Walters say, in addition to lying about our funding and what we advocate, it's that we're coming in from out of state. We obviously always hear that, clap back, and I think it's an important opportunity to point out that, as I did earlier, we're receiving complaints from locals most of the time. People within a community, usually within a public school district, who are affected. That's how we hear about these things.
Yeah, it's also important to note we are a national organization. We've got 40,000 members across the country, members in every state, and so we're headquartered in Wisconsin, but in no way are we sort of just a Wisconsin group. Yeah, we're based here, but we work across the country. The other thing that's important to point out too, that I think we need to not dance around, is that it should be important for everyone in this country that the Constitution is being followed and that people's rights are not being trampled on. The idea that
that's not a Wisconsin value.
The idea that we in Wisconsin cannot care about the students in Oklahoma is ridiculous. And I wonder if that's how he feels. Maybe he doesn't care about what happens to us here in Wisconsin, and so he's projecting that. But we care about constitutional rights across the country. That's why we've become constitutional attorneys, because we want to uphold those rights for everyone, regardless of where they live. That's what's great about being an American.
Yeah,
I would cut into this a little too with the idea behind it. I think is oftentimes like, those can't be our people. Like, we can't have atheists or people who don't believe as I do in Oklahoma. I think it's very much only out-of-state outsiders think this way, and not the people in Oklahoma, which we know is not true. FFRF has members in Oklahoma, certainly complainants that are there that are bringing these to us. So I just think it's a little bit of trying to say our people aren't like this, which is just, I think, delusional.
Right, and just highlights the point of the problem is that you think that everyone's Christian, and so you can have these Christian prayers, and they're really not, especially now. I mean, demographically, the students are, it's extremely likely that basically every school district now is going to have non-religious students, just because of the huge numbers. The idea that any school district is going to be entirely one religion is basically nearly impossible.
Mm-hmm. Right, and you're saying to those students, you don't matter as much as the students who believe like I do, which is wrong. Here's one about, or kind of that follows from Patrick, the Oath lawsuit. Have any states that bar non-theists from running for office ever fought back against any action taken against that? Is it a holdover from older laws? Yes, that legislators are willing to strike down. And I think we get that question kind of a lot. Like, what of laws on the books that actually ban non-theists from running for office?
Yeah, it's kind of a layered question, because there are still laws or even constitutional provisions in some states that would bar people who aren't religious, people who aren't Christian even, or people who aren't believe in a God from office. Those are unconstitutional and basically unenforceable. And in part, there had been fights about this. I would say this has been kind of resolved since the 1960s. There was a case, Turcaso versus Watkins, where basically the U.S. Supreme Court said, you can't bar somebody from being, as I recall, I think he wanted to be a notary. He couldn't be a notary because he wouldn't, make the religious affirmation that was required. So effectively, those are all dead. So if your state has that, you can run for office. The scary part is, as we know now, especially because of some of the Supreme Court's abortion decision, that's problematic to have bad laws on the books or bad constitutional provisions, because a change in a court decision could take that away someday. I don't think that's realistically going to happen in the near future, but they shouldn't be on the books anywhere. But yes, that is correct that some states still have those provisions.
Yeah, right. I agree 100%. It's not harmless, and they should be removed from state constitutions where they exist, and also statutes should be repealed that require religious tests for office. But it's one of those situations where, because they're completely unenforceable, they're not being enforced against anybody that has standing to sue. And so it takes legislative will, which we all know is tough. Yeah, even like legislators who would agree that it shouldn't be there anymore are not going to, in most areas, going to be willing to take that sort of political hit by being like, they can then go to say, oh, you guys made it so atheists can run for office now because you took the law off the books. So just unfortunately, because of the way that atheists are still viewed in a lot of areas, they're not able to do that, but they should. Right. Here's a question from Facebook. How do you choose the complaints of religion in schools that you pursue?
Yeah, so what actually happens is we receive thousands of complaints every year that go to our intake attorney, Maddie, who evaluates, we get a lot of complaints that we can't take action on. Either there's not actually a violation, someone misunderstood, or something like that. Then we then sort of have the country split up, and various attorneys will work in different areas and will evaluate, whether there is a violation going on, who did it, get all the facts and everything. We'll write to the school district about it, and then, like I said, hopefully a lot of times, we'll get results like we did in the non-litigation victories I talked about, where the school district does the right thing. If they don't do the right thing, then that's when we're able to turn and look and see, okay, well, now we need to evaluate whether this is going to be worth taking action on. There's a lot of things that need to happen there. We need a plaintiff. We need a parent or a student actually affected by whatever's going on in order to take that. We have to kind of look at the area that it's in, what's going on, and evaluate sort of our resources. Is this a high level? Like, is this an issue that's that we need to be clarifying? Is this an issue that we'll win on? Things like that. Unfortunately, it's pretty complicated and obviously very case by case specific. But we obviously evaluate every complaint that comes in and has the potential to be a case in the future if everything follows correctly with it.
Yeah. Well, here's a couple more questions that are just specific to individual issues, but I think are worth taking because we hear them a lot. Has FFRF, you guys will hate this, but people are curious. Has FFRF advocated for the removal of "In God We Trust" on currency? And is there anything that can or could be done about this? And it's somewhat in a category like antiquated oaths, antiquated requirements for office laws on the books, in that it's this old, tolerated ceremonial deism concept that is very hard to penetrate with current legal action. What do you think, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, this predates all of our terms at FFRF. So FFRF had been challenging that, especially when when the courts were more favorable. That's not a case we'd be taking probably today, given the courts. And the point that Liz is making, which is kind of a good news, bad news situation, is when courts have looked at "In God We Trust," on currency, they've said that, well, we don't really think over the course of time this has kind of lost its religious significance. It's kind of how some of the courts have talked about ceremonial deism. Not all judges agree with that, but I think from our side, the court is still kind of saying, one way to interpret it is the court is still saying, well, yeah, you can't, we can't just put blatant religious stuff all over, but we're giving this one a pass because it has this very lengthy time that it was done. So I think in that category, I think we can let it lie, but it is something, over the course of FFRF's, existence that we fought for and just don't have a viable path right now to probably challenge it. Yeah,
and I mean, the core, issue that is worth noting is that it is the national motto. So that is what makes it more complicated because it's not, if someone's putting "In God We Trust," you can say, hey, you're trying to promote religion. They're like, whoa, we're just putting the national, we're just being patriotic and putting the national motto on something. That obviously complicates it more.
Right. But important to say that the fact of it being the national motto is, in the view of FFRF, a violation of the spirit and the letter of the Establishment Clause.
Just going to say, where's Justice Thomas with textualism? So Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, and then Congress adopts a national motto that's "In God We Trust." I mean, this is very clearly, if you were going to actually be consistent, that's a problem. That's a violation of the Establishment Clause. But we've all know that the courts probably are not willing to go that way today.
Yeah.
That's right. Someday. Okay, let's see. I'm going to ask one more of these questions. Okay. Sorry for the Ryan Walters questioners. We've talked about him enough today.
Yeah.
Has FFRF considered or participated in in-person protests like the one seen in Cavell County? Or does that raise any constitutional concerns or other concerns?
I don't know, raises concern. I guess that actually does kind of bring up the Wisconsin-based group. I mean, we have chapters in various that will sometimes get involved in stuff, but obviously FFRF's not going to fly me down to Oklahoma.
Right, and of course, in the way that these things happen, that would never be feasible.
We have done things here in
we
Madison.
participate in in-person
Franklin
protests
Graham was here
here.
and we did some protesting. Mike Pence had came and we did some protesting. And I think any sort of, people sort of pushing religion and things in a bad way. We've FFRF has protested locally before.
And in Texas, Rick Perry in Texas was hosting a large revival type event that FFRF was there for on behalf of our Texas members. But I think my favorite is Betsy DeVos and Mike Pence, personally being there and being able to, get pretty close and tell them basically that we disagreed with them because they chose a very poor venue for the event that they were holding, which was the Wisconsin Capitol. So we all had a right to be there and to tell them that we disagreed with them.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, just because we, as our national organization, can't be everywhere, we obviously do encourage people, if you have an issue in your local community and you want to get people together and say something about it, I think you should. I mean, like I said, we were very heartened to see what happened in Cavell County, and it would be really nice if that happened in more places, if people were more willing to stand up for their rights in that way.
Absolutely. And with Huntington, I mean, we're talking Huntington, West Virginia. Mm-hmm. Kind of unexpected.
Yeah, not the place I would have guessed. If you just told me the students were having a protest over to support the Establishment Clause, I wouldn't have guessed.
But it goes to the heart of what we were talking about earlier, which is it shows these people, government actors, who think that everyone in these communities is Christian and nobody's harmed by school officials promoting or backing a particular religion. Mm-hmm. Shows them that these people exist and they are here. They're there in Huntington, West Virginia, and there's 100 of them standing outside, and they're, and they're like mad. They're alienated. They're not being represented. They're being proselytized, and they're just standing up and saying, "Hey, we're here." And it made a big difference, I think, in the way that the entire trajectory of the lawsuit played out.
Right, and you're right. I mean, even exactly in that case, like the district seemed to think that the problem was, oh, we're sorry, like we didn't mean to make these classes weren't supposed to be mandated to go. We just wanted to hold a voluntary Christian revival in the middle of the school day.
Right.
We wanted the students who want to be a part of a Christian revival to leave their study free period, whatever it was, and go, have a full-on religious experience during the public school, in a public school. So clearly they didn't even get it, then that was what they thought was wrong. So like you said, assuming everyone's Christian, this is totally fine. We should be using our school to push Christianity, and that obviously needs to stop.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of that, in person, because it's like a safety in numbers thing too. It made our lawsuit stronger because it made plaintiffs more comfortable and willing to come forward and join the lawsuit because they were not alone. They were represented. And
it is risky, but you see a situation like this, I'm sure maybe each of those kids individually would have felt scared to stand up and fight for their rights. But when they all came out, it's like, we all kind of agree, we're all kind of on the same page, and hopefully that can happen in more places.
Well, I'm going to leave it there for today. That's going to conclude Ask an Atheist for this week. Don't forget, we also have a weekly broadcast TV show, Free Thought Matters. This week, we're featuring the first of 2 programs of the free thinking songs of FFRF co-president Dan Barker. Here's a preview.
When I was a child, I thought of childish things, eternal life in paradise with angel wings, a father up in heaven who would hover over me and tell me what to think and tell me what to be. But now that I have grown, it's time to use my own good mind. I'm out of here. Let me out of here. I found my own place. I've left my father's house behind.
You can see Free Thought Matters on TV stations all across the U.S. and also on FFRF's Facebook and YouTube channels.
And don't miss Free Thought Radio. This week the show features award-winning free-thinking student essays from our recent national convention. You can find the show at ffrf.org/radio.
Check out the latest episode of our We Dissent podcast, where you can hear me, Rebecca Markert, and American atheist Allison Gill interview Professor Marcy Hamilton. We talked to Professor Hamilton about the origin story of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. and how it's led us to the emerging theocracy we're facing. Listen and subscribe to We Dissent wherever you listen to podcasts, or check us out online, we-dissent.org.
If you want more information about the Freedom From Religion Foundation, check out our website at ffrf.org. If you're a member already, thank you. If not, please join us, and we will see you next week on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.